quick trigger warning. I will be talking about blood, gore, and murder. I'm talking about horror stories today. So if that is not something you want to hear, feel free to skip this episode. See you guys in the next one. Hey guys, welcome to the next episode of Pouring My Thoughts, the podcast where I talk about whatever I want and whatever I'm feeling, hosted by me, HJ, your favorite anonymous podcast host. This week, I did not do a random drawing because I've been reading this book and I kind of want to talk about it. I started reading Out There Screaming, which is an anthology of Black horror. It is edited by Jordan Peele and John somebody. Hold on. John, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna remember it. John Joseph Adams, that's his name. Um, I've been wanting to get back into reading. I was the type that was reading like college level books in elementary school. I was reading through series. Like we had almost all of the books in the Babysitters Club collection. I read these books called A to C Mysteries. I read a bunch of Nancy Drew books. Well, actually, I read a couple. I read Hardy Boys and mostly the Boxcar Children. I read more Boxcar Children than anything. Well, in those little kid mysteries, but A to Z mysteries, pretty much any books by Ron Roy. I read all the Jimmy Jones books. I read series of Unfortunate Events. Not all of them. I only had the end. That was the only one I had on hand. What other series did I read? Obviously Goosebumps, and then I started reading what's his name? Oh God, his name is gonna. I started reading Stephen King books. The first one I had started was Insomnia, but I never finished it because it was at that time very boring to me because there wasn't a lot of dialogue. It was really just like a lot of narration over this man's life. Um, I might reread it because I still have it, but I also read a bunch of other books, like this one book called by Lois Duncan, I believe that's their name, and it was called Killing Mr. Griffin. Great book, but I read that when I was like fifth grade, and I remember my teacher looking at me like, "Why is this fifth grader reading this?" Um, I read some books by John Grisham, um, and anyway, I used to read all the time. I read whatever I can get my hands on. Um, and all kinds of series and all that stuff. And I would read whatever I could, my mom's books. Um, and then by the time I became a teenager, like mid-teens, I wasn't reading as much anymore just because I was distracted by other things in life. But I wanted to get back into writing, so in order to write, you need to read. And I enjoy reading. I love stories. I still have stories that stuck with me my entire life ever since I've read them. Like this one book called Don't Close Your Eyes. If You Do, You Die by Robert Ross. I think that's his name. Um, if that's not the name, I'm gonna put it up on the screen. Also, there won't be very many things on the screen, so if you're watching this on YouTube, there'll be a couple splash in, but there shouldn't be too much for this one, just because I'm gonna be talking about a book. Um, but I used to read all kinds of things, and there are just like a lot of stories that have stuck with me. And my favorite things to read are things that make you think. I like anything psychological. I love mysteries. I love thrillers. I love horror. I love some kind of philosophical books. It kind of depends on what the philosophy is. Like, I read this book and I love it so much. I need to read it again, but it's called The Alchemist. And it is about this guy who, if I can remember correctly, he's on this journey, a physical journey, first off, but he's also on this new spiritual, thoughtful journey. Um, and the way that it was written is just so beautiful, and it really does make you pause and kind of think about life and how you view it. Um, I'm gonna put that back up on the screen too, because it's such a great book. Um, and there's just a lot of books, and I have a lot on my reading list that I want to get to. There are a lot of books I haven't finished. Like, I'm notorious for starting Stephen King books and then watching the movie, even if I've already seen the movie and never reading it again. Oh, we're not finishing like it. Like I had already seen it, the older ones. I've seen them all at this point, but at the time I had already seen the older versions with Tim Curry playing Pennywise, and then I started to read the book, and then I was like, oh, let me watch the movie again, and I did, and I just never finished the book. I did the same with Misery, and I love the movie Misery. Oh my god, it's amazing. And what other book did I? Oh, I did that with Dreamcatcher, and I did it with Carrie, and I had already seen Carrie too. The only Stephen King book that I have actually finished all the way through is Christine, and I've seen both the movie and I've read the book, and that is my favorite Stephen King story thus far that I've like read and that I've read because I was when I finished, but the one that only like my favorite movie. Gosh, I don't know why I was struggling to say that, but I love Christine. It's one of my favorite stories. Um, I also really excuse me, I also really enjoy reading short stories. And there are a lot of short stories that have stuck with me over the years, like The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and The Bet by Anton Chekhov. And oh, The Yellow Wallpaper. I'm struggling to remember the author of that. Um, I can't remember the author for that story, but that one talks about mental health, and I really really like that one. Um, and my favorite author of all time is Edgar Allan Poe. I have his entire collection of every story, every poem that he has ever written that's been published anyway, and I have all of them. And I love his stuff so much. I fell in love with his work when I was in fourth grade, and my teacher, I was in the I don't know what they're called across the country, but in Georgia it was called Gifted, and it's basically just like another program that you're in for kids who just learn a bit faster or learn a bit differently. Um, and I was in that. I know in Memphis it's called Clue. I was in Clue as well. But in Georgia, I was in fourth grade and they introduced us to Edgar Allan Poe, which is very crazy considering it's a fourth grade class. You get introduced to some very like dark and macabre stories. But the very first story they showed us was The Telltale Heart. And I remember somebody gave me, I don't know where I got it from, but it was a collection of like five Edgar Allan Poe stories that had The Telltale Heart, The Cask of Amontillado, The Fall of the House of Usher, and the go. It has one more of the story, and I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. But I remember reading The Telltale Heart, and that story just stuck with me. And I ended up really, really liking his work, and I ended up reading a bunch of other ones. My favorite Edgar Allan Poe story is The Cask of Amontillado, um, just because of how the just because of how it ends, like the fact that um between Montressor and the conversations between Montressor and Fortunato during the entire thing, knowing what Montressor is knowing he is about to do something heinous, he has this plan, and the mind games of constantly giving Fortunato the ability to escape it, but knowing his pride won't let him. And it's it's so good. And just how he kind of heartlessly just basically kills him. Not basically, he kills him in the end. But it's how he does it. And it's just the lack of heart, the lack of care for him doing it. I think the part that gets me really is just his mind games, just the manipulative nature of him. Because we don't really know too much about Montressor. We just know he has this grudge against Fortunato. What the grudge is, I can't really remember if it's explicitly said, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of it is implied. Um, and you just kind of have to interpret. I remember talking about this story in my English Lit 2 class, I believe it was. And we were just talking about like the character of Montressor specifically because it does mention that he is a Mason. Um but we don't know if he is actually a part of the family or if he worked for the family. Um and I can go. I'm gonna go into a tangent. We're gonna run out of time to talk about what I actually want to talk about. But just know, I really, really love Edgar Poe's stories. I might do a separate episode about a bunch of his stories that I really like. Um, but yes, I love Edgar Poe. But my point is, I really love reading. I love different stories. So I decided that I was going to start reading again this year. I tried this last year, not last year, year before last, and I only got two books that year. Um, and I was very upset with myself. But this year, I'm gonna do better. Um, I'm gonna do one book a month and try and hold myself to that. And I started this year with Out There Screaming. I actually started it the 30th or the 31st of December. Um, and yeah, I started Out There Screaming. I'm gonna talk about the first three short stories. Oh, it's a collection of short stories. There's 19 stories in there. I'm gonna talk about the first three. There are gonna be spoilers. I'll give a quick synopsis of each of the three stories, just in case you still want to read them based on the synopsis. Then you can just come back and listen to how I feel about each of the stories. Um, so yeah, and as I continue going through the book and collecting all my thoughts, I'll continue to talking about them over the course of the next few episodes in between other episodes. It just won't be back to back Out There Screaming analysis. But yeah, so the first story I want to talk about is called Reckless Eyeballing. This one is written by N.K. Jemisin. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. Um, but it's about a black cop who is the epitome of police brutality and misuse of power and heinousness and evil, basically, in my eyes. But basically, he has discovered that he has this gift of, I use the word gift loosely. He sees it as a gift of seeing eyes on the headlights of cars that gives him um this tell that there's something wrong with the person who's driving in the car, that there's something um afoot in that car. And he uses this to pull people over, but but like I said, he misuses his power, and he uses brutal methods to take these people in. He uses them on these people. So that's pretty much the gist of the story. Now, specifically, oh, actually, let me do the synopsis of the next two. The second one I'm going to talk about is Eye and Tooth. That one is written by Rebecca Roanhorse. I believe that's how you say that. Um, and this is a story about two siblings, a brother and a sister, who are monster hunters. In a time where um, it's where the everyday civilian is able to kind of do their own work based on information they get on the internet. So it's kind of a lost art. And they have a job at this older woman's house. And then the last story is called Wandering Devil, and that one is written by Cadwell Turnbull. And this one is about a man who pretty much following in the footsteps of his mother, and just in that he just leaves whenever he wants to, no matter who it hurts, no matter how bad it hurts, no matter who he's leaving behind, no matter what it is. And he is struggling with the idea of doing that to someone he kind of loves and cares about. Not kind of, but he loves and cares about. So he's deciding on what to do with that. Now, obviously, all these stories are deeper meanings and deeper things that need to be discussed within each of these stories. I will touch, I guess I will touch on those because it's kind of hard not to. Um, but I mainly want to focus on just the story itself, um, and things that I liked about it and things that I didn't like about it. So for the first one, for Reckless Eyeballing, overall, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. Um, well, no, I feel like that's two. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5 because I I do like the story. However, I do feel like I feel like it was missing something. I really liked how it ended, and I liked how it was written, how descriptive it was, for certain parts. Now these are the spoilers. Um, Specifically at the end when he ends up killing his friend slash I don't want to say partner because it was just another person that also works in the law enforcement, but in a different county. At this point, basically the main character, he anytime he goes to someone's car, he checks for cameras before he does anything he has no business doing. However, there was this one incident that he didn't realize it was filming, and it was a Muslim woman, and he attacked her, and she sued for that in sexual assault, and it went viral. And so now it's pending. He is suspended, ends up losing his pretty much just losing his job, and his friend who has done a lot of favors to him, who is also in law enforcement, who's a sheriff in a different county, um is potentially going to give him a job in that place. Now the reason that they are together towards the end of in this part of the story is because the main character has this very expensive car. It's a 1975 G Series Porsche 911, that he has been restoring himself for some time. He ended up getting it through shady means. If I'm not mistaken, he planted evidence on someone else in order to get it because it went to the impound, and then he was able to buy it that way. But he got it through sinister methods. Anyway, um, he has this car, and he needs the money because he's been out of work for some time, and so he ends up selling the car to Bo, to who is the sheriff of the next town over. The main character's name is Carl. But he ends up selling the car to Bo. Bo gets the car, and the car is malfunctioning somehow. So Carl is going to go over to fix it. Um, and he ends up wondering, he's like, wait, I've never even checked to see if I see the eyes on Bo's car. Now, Carl has had some dreams lately that he's ended up seeing the eyes on the Porsche in his dream. So his car, he was seeing the eyes on them. And he ends up going back to Bo's house the next day, after finding out about after trying to figure out what's wrong with the car, and he couldn't. He said, I'll work on it for you, but let me come back. Let me come back to figure out. Let me come back to look at it. So he comes back to go look at it, but he's also trying to get a look at Bo's actual car, and he doesn't see the eyes there. Um, and so he's a little bit confused. Um, he ends up seeing the eyes on the Porsche, and now he's confused. He feels like his gift is going away, and he believes that it's because he sold the car and he wasn't supposed to do that. So now he feels like he has to get rid of its new owner, which is Bo. He ends up killing Bo and starts seeing the eyes everywhere. He sees them all over the car, in the trunk when he goes to put Bo in there because he's planning to go dump the car and Bo. Um, and then he starts seeing the eyes. All like I said, he starts seeing them all over the car, and then he starts seeing them on himself. And the story pretty much ends in alluding to the fact that he's about to damage his own body to get rid of the eyes. And he feels like this is what he must do. He was given this gift to save people, to be the hero, to get rid of bad people. Um, Now, like I said, I love how it was written in that. I love how descriptive it was, the way that it alludes to these. I feel like a lot of the times in the story, anytime he does something, when he starts when he goes to kill Boney before he hurts himself, it's just alluded to. It's not specifically described, and I really like that because it kind of lets your mind figure it out, and your mind can mold it however. It gives you the freedom to see that however you want, and I like having that ability when I'm reading a story. Let Basically leaving it to your imagination, because it kind of lets your own mind kind of run wild. Um, Now the things that I don't like about the story is I feel like there should have been, like, there could have been a little bit more in telling where the eyes came from. Like, it was told in a third person um perspective. And I'm not omniscient. Third person limited point of view, where we really only see everything from Carl's perspective. Um but I want to know more about the eyes specifically, like where they came from, how long he's had this ability, where he initially got them. Um, I do wish we could have learned a bit more about what it signifies. Um, the story itself, I was doing some research on it, and the author wanted to talk about not just police brutality, but in the injustices around that. Because in this story, I skipped over a lot of them, but there are several people that he harmed, using uh, this skill or whatever, um, and the injustice that came behind it, because he pretty much just got a slap on the wrist. He knew he could continue to do these things and nothing would really happen to him. And and it talks about that and how much of a problem that really is, but also this aspect of race, because he is a black man and a lot of his coworkers are white men. Um and I don't know. I I just feel like there's more to be said about what that means. Um being that kind of officer. I am a black woman, and normally when I hear of stories when it comes to police brutality, I typically only see white officers. Um, and so it's very interesting to see this being played out through a black officer. That is not to say that black officers aren't capable of doing such things. But I feel like the story could have maybe talked about what that means a little bit more. I may have to reread it because maybe I missed something. Um, but I feel like I just wish that was touched on a little bit more. So basically it just knocked a half and a point off for me, a point and a half for me, because I feel like that aspect needed to be touched on a little bit more, and what the eyes meant, or what they were, um, where they came from. Because the way that I see it is people feeling like they have this gift and they need to use it for the greater good, but end up going the wrong way about everything, or just a serious vision of misuse. um Not misuse, misunderstanding, or prejudgment. That's the word I'm looking for. This prejudice on people, um and coming to whatever conclusion that they want. Now, the title itself, I had to look into what that meant. Reckless eyeballing, I did not know. Um, it refers to a time back during Jim Crow era, if I'm not mistaken, where a black man, basically, if you look too long at a white woman, you would receive repercussions, and we know how deadly those could have been. Um, and that's what that title refers to. And so I'm wondering, um I feel like it could have been tied to the story just a little bit better, that idea. And maybe I just misread or misunderstood. So let me know what you think about that story. I might have to reread it. Now the second story was Eye and Tooth, about the two monster hutting siblings. Now this one I love a lot. Um Mostly just because of the story itself. Spoilers. This was about two siblings who are monster hunters, and they go to this. They have a job that is out in the boonies, working with this older woman. Now, Eye and Tooth refer to their abilities that have been passed on for generations. Um, that you can't pretty much have one with the other. Eye is having the ability to see everything, to see beyond the human eye, to see anything that is heinous going on, see the spirits, see things that are not okay, right? And tooth is the fight, the 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 guard, the fighter, the what's the word I'm looking for? The huntress herself. That's who she is. Um so I is the brother Atticus, and Tooth is his sister Zelda. Um and it's pretty much told about through her perspective, also in the third person. Um and they get to this house. She doesn't really want to be there. It's a little spooky. She's very much a city girl, and they're out in the country. They get to this older woman's house, and it's talked about throughout the story. She's had multiple times to eat food, and she just didn't eat them, and chose not to because she doesn't eat that stuff. Um, but she is also hungry. She keeps saying that she's hungry, and we get to this house, and they're confronted. Oh my god, they are welcomed loosely by an older woman who is the one who called them out for the job, and she's saying there's something in my cornfield. I thought it was something small, but I keep finding dead animals, but it's something large, and I don't know what it is. Um, and then a little girl comes downstairs while they're talking. Mind you, at this point, Atticus is eating food. He's eating something that the older woman had made. And this little girl comes downstairs, and the older woman says, "No, you need to leave. Like, you know better," type thing. Zelda didn't really like that very much. Um, and so the little girl leaves, and they continue talking. They said you could stay here for the night. And it seems that the older woman is paying a lot of attention to Atticus. And like when he was eating, she kind of smiled a little bit. Zelda was a little put off by that. Um, and he said, or she said, the older woman said, "I've heard about y'all's abilities. It's something in y'all's blood. My grandmother used to practice that, basically witchcraft. But she said it's something about black people's blood. It's in their blood. There's something there." And she told us about the eye. One of y'all has the eye. So what do you see? And Zelda kind of motions to her brother, who does have the eye, and she was like, "Okay, well, what do you see? Because you're the one that has it." And he just kind of looked up. He looked where the little girl was, and kind of shook his head. And the and Zelda says, "Doesn't kind of work that way. Just give us more information." She does that, and then afterwards they're like, "Can you just rest up for the night?" Zelda's like, "I'll go hunting," and Atticus is gonna go to sleep. Atticus went to go lay down, and he was pretty much out like a light, real quick. And um, not Atticus, Zelda decides she's gonna go on outside. Now it is storming outside. She didn't really be there, and it was creepy and pitch black dark. So she grabs her flashlight. She goes outside and sees the little girl is out there, and she is like, "What are you doing out here? Get back in the house." And she remember how the grandmother talked to her, and she didn't want to continue to do that. So she's like, "Fine, you can come with me," but she does that very begrudgingly. And they go out and they find a dead animal, and Zelda kind of licks her lips, and it was very strange. And the little girl goes hungry, and she kind of points to the animal. Um, and they don't think she doesn't really think too much of it. They go back in the house, and they'll figure it out later, like the next day. They go back inside. Atticus is still out. Zelda goes to sleep, and she wakes up the next morning and decides, "I'm gonna go to the hardware store that we passed on the way here, build some traps." She goes to the hardware store, finds out that the older woman there had a granddaughter who has passed away, which is very confusing because there is her granddaughter at the house. And at this moment, everything kind of clicks. The night before, Atticus only said one thing to Zelda. All he said was "doll." Now, there were also a bunch of little dolls around the house, like little, small, little cornhusk dolls around the house. And the older woman had a ribbon for like a prize ribbon. Like that's what she made the town was known because of her abilities to build these really pretty, I guess, cornhusk dolls. And Zelda kind of remember all these things, and she flew back to the house and was like, that's why she was talking about the blood. That's why she was talking about our abilities. Turns out the older woman is feeding the quote unquote granddaughter to letting the granddaughter eat the blood of animals to try and keep it alive. Um and if she had the blood of the eye, then she could really be alive, and that was her whole goal, was just to try and kill one of them to get their blood. um I'll quickly mention the granddaughter passed away years ago because of an accident. Leg got caught in a bear trap, and no one found her for a while, and she ended up bleeding out. um but anyway, Zelda gets back to the house, figure out what's going on, and amidst them fighting, this is when we find out that Zelda is not just literally Tooth as in I'm about to fight. She is actually some kind of monster. I assume like something in the werewolf category, just because of how it was described that she kind of transformed into this monster. Zelda ends up killing the older woman, and the story pretty much ends the next day. Atticus is trying to patch up because the granddaughter did end up getting to him a little bit. Um, and they're preparing to leave, but she doesn't want to leave the little girl behind. So they end up taking the little girl with them. She mentions that I can train her to be a good monster hunter, and Atticus doesn't really fight it because he says that he knows best that in order to find a monster, you need a monster, or you can use a monster. Or no, that's not what he says. He says the best monster hunters are the monsters themselves, referring to the fact that his sister is also a monster. Um, and I just like that story. I love everything about it. I like the little twist ending. I like talking about the generational aspects of it. There is this um a lot of talks, and I saw this topic mentioned a lot when I was watching Sinners, or I was watching interviews about Sinners, specifically with Anne's character. um Annie, I don't know why I was struggling with Annie's character. Moonmi, who plays her, said that she looked into the spiritual practices of Black people over history, um and how those things are passed down from generation to generation, and how they're able to do all these great things within that area. um and they kind of touch on this in this story, just how these practices are passed down from generation to generation within the Black culture. Now, I myself am not for witchcraft or any of those black magic practices. It goes against what I believe in personally. Do I feel like it exists? 1000%. Do I mess with it? Absolutely not, because I personally don't trust where that power comes from. Um, because I don't believe it's from the Lord. Um, you can believe what you want. That's just where I stand. However, there are interesting stories that use these ideas. And I feel like this is one of them. Outside of the magicalness, I do like a good monster hunter story. I do like a good supernatural hunt story. And I feel like that's what this was. Now we're getting a little bit long here. You know what? I'm going to save the last story, Wandering Devil, for the next one. I might do these episodes in twos, maybe threes, depending on how much time I have for the next one. But this one ran a little long. So thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any other pointers on the stories themselves, let me know. Like I said, Reckless Eyeballing, it was okay. It was a good story. I just felt like it was missing some pieces. Iron Tooth, I love how it was written. I love the characters. Zelda is a little bit she seems like she's a little bit, what's the word? Nonchalant, but she she gives that air. She has that air about her, very nonchalant air, but she's really very kind-hearted. Like she has a heart and soul in there, despite being the monster of the two. I do wish we would have learned a little bit more about Atticus. Um, I feel like I'd like to see more about more of those characters in general. I wonder if the author has considered doing a little bit more with them, but I really like it. Um, and it was written very well. I felt like I was there. That was one of those stories where I do genuinely feel like I was with Zelda the entire time. So I highly recommend reading that story. Um, so yes, I will talk to you guys next time. At some point, we'll continue going through the rest of this book. We'll end up doing it over the next few months. I already know with this one because there are, like I said, 19 stories. But I will still keep you guys updated on what books I'm reading. I'm gonna try and leave a link to. I might link my Goodreads account. Maybe we'll see. And you can follow what I'm reading there or books that I want to read. If you have any recommendations, I'm very, very open to most things. But yes, thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in. I will see you guys at the next one. See ya.